I know this isn't the entire senior class of parents, but again, we like to record all our events, so you could certainly share this information with any other senior parents, or you can check out BCAT. So I just want to make sure, I think many parents know your son or daughter's counselor, but we do have within our office, this kind of lists our counseling staff. We have 2 administrative assistants in the counseling office. And Teresa Kavanaugh, she's the registrar. So she sends out transcripts. It's not like it was, 20 years ago where it was hard copy transcripts. Obviously, now we all know most things are digital, so transcripts are sent digitally, but they are still sent to each individual college. So she still processes those all the time, so Teresa is certainly someone that if you call the office, may answer the phone, or if you do have like transcript-specific questions. I've seen a lot of parents and students in to get transcripts for car insurance purposes too, so she handles all that stuff. And down the road, when we talk about scholarships, we'll cover that a little bit tonight, she helps to process a lot of the local scholarships as well. And then we also have, they'll introduce themselves when they're up, but we have Amanda Murphy, Molly Leary, and we have an intern this year, Jack Fitzgerald. So where should seniors be in the process now? Again, there were opportunities for all last spring. The current seniors were junior year, would have met with their counselor a few times. We had a summer application workshop. Not sure if any of your children came to that. We've been doing that the past 4 or 5 years. It's an opportunity for seniors to come in. So we try to put things in along the way, obviously, to help students feel a little bit ahead of the game. But really, students, now's the time to be finalizing that list, all right? A lot of students have a rough list. Some students have a final list. Some students are still trying to kind of figure that out. But we really want students to be having a set list. I think now is the time to really start to get organized and focused and making sure students are understanding the expectations of each of the colleges that they're applying to. We'll talk more about this, but you're going to choose an admissions option, all right? So one of the counselors will discuss that in more depth. We do have a higher percentages of our students, probably about 2/3 of our students, pushing 3/4, that are applying early, whether it's action or decision. So a lot of students do apply early because you find out earlier. I think that's the biggest thing, right? So students know sometime in January where they're headed to college, and that, I think, takes a little bit of the pressure off. But again, deadlines, that's the big piece as well, knowing when the deadlines are coming, all right, and preparing for that. So this senior class was actually the first class that we opened up college visits to juniors. So for years, we would just have seniors attend our college visits, but we now have juniors and seniors, which I thought, we've kind of felt as a department that was needed because juniors, I think we get lots of questions from parents and students on the various colleges and things like that, and so this is a great opportunity for juniors as well. But we have college reps. There's a number of ways to handle visiting a college. One thing that we do here at the high school, we probably have between 50 and 60 colleges and universities that come right here on campus, and they meet with students in small groups. So this has been communicated to seniors, the process to sign up, but basically the colleges come in and they meet with students in small groups. Well, it depends on the college. UMass Amherst, for example, we probably have around 100 students that will listen to the rep talk a little bit about the school. And that's what it is. It's a representative from the school, usually the admissions counselor that works with Burlington as well. But they'll come in and they'll talk to the student, and it's basically, commercial for the college. Students can get good information and they can ask, individualized type questions. But it's a good opportunity for students to hear about the whatever college they're interested in. We've already had a few who's come in. We've had Clemson in. Jack, you've done a few. Holy Cross, Purdue, Endicott. So from all around the country, colleges will come in. Other visits, we know virtual college, there's virtual college fairs, same idea, there's reps, but they're there virtually. In-person college fairs, you don't see those as much. Burlington High School, we do co-sponsor one in March with other Middlesex League schools. It's usually at Reading High School. We do have information about some of those college fairs if anyone's interested. Mr. Sullivan and I actually met with an agency today that does a very interesting thing on virtual college visits. It's a virtual college visit, but it's a real-time visit, a virtual thing, kind of like a FaceTime almost, and it's from a student that is currently on the campus. So it's a pretty interesting model. It's the first I've heard of it, but we're thinking of maybe piloting this. And so as a student, you could say, you're interested in UNC, and you can go to this website and schedule one of these tours. And basically, you're on your phone, and this person's live on the campus, and they're an actual student taking you around, and you can ask very individualized questions. So I think you're going to see more about that. If you have students that are, younger than seniors, you may actually be, students may be part of that pilot program. And then you'll hear a lot about demonstrated interest. Anyone heard of that before? Demonstrated interest? Yep, okay. So basically demonstrated interest is colleges like to track data, and they want to know, they're about to make an investment in your son or daughter, and they want to know what kind of an interest they have in their school before they accept them. So a student goes on a college visit, they're signing up. When they go to that college visit, they're writing their name down. The college is collecting that. They're sending an email. The college is aware of that. So some of these things that students will do, colleges will track that data. All right? Now, just because you go to a campus 150 times doesn't mean you're going to get in either. But at the same time, when they're deciding between two students, all things being equal, this student may show that they have demonstrated a high interest. So if you're going to take a gamble, you might want to go with that one. So that's called demonstrated interest. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Leary.
Hi, everyone. My name's Molly Leary. I'm one of the counselors here. Thanks for coming tonight. I know tomorrow's open house. I don't think we traditionally do back-to-back nights, so thanks for coming. As Mr. Adebato said, we do meet with students in small groups in junior year to try to check as many boxes as we can and help walk them through certain things they can do in junior year. Other things can't happen until senior year. For example, they don't know certain deadlines for colleges. They can't access a lot of applications in junior year. So now they're in the thick of it. So as we meet with students this year, we recognize that everyone is in a different spot. Some have made a lot more progress last year and throughout the summer, and some are just starting the process, and that's okay too. It's okay. So we recognize that as we meet with students, a lot of it at this point is one-on-one. And so when they're narrowing down their list of colleges, we want them to be considering a balance of reach, realistic, also known as target. We use those terms interchangeably, and safety schools. And so there's no correct number of schools to apply to. We can't suggest that. It's really what the student is comfortable with when they are narrowing down their list and how many they would like to apply to. Excuse me. So of course, a reach is where admission is going to be less likely. For a student, there are colleges, of course, there are reaches for everyone, even students at the very top of their graduating class. Realistic or target is that the probability of admission is even to slightly better than even, and a safety is where admission is highly likely. None of this is a guarantee. We always recommend that when students are considering their safety, that they're not just throwing a school on there that they haven't visited as a safety, because you never know what might happen. You might end up attending your safety, so you want your safeties to be colleges that you can see yourself attending. And also not everyone's safety, someone's safety could be someone else's reach school. So those are things to consider too. We don't want them comparing themselves to their friends or their peers. And then families will want to consider financial safeties, which are schools that meet the expectations of a student's academic background and financial background. We do have data at our fingertips through the platform that we use called SCORE. We have local BHS data, so BHS students can see how they stack up against alumni, and whether they were admitted or denied from certain schools, so they can actually see graphs within SCORE, which is really helpful in figuring out which schools might reach realistic or safety for themselves. And then, of course, there's lots of national data at your fingertips right on the computer. When considering national data, it is helpful. I will say, for students to know their unweighted GPA, BHS we use a weighted GPA, and so it's best to consider that weighted GPA with the scattergram data within SCORE, where they're comparing themselves to BHS alumni. When you're looking at national data, it can be different because they might be using a traditional 4.0 scale, so it can sometimes be misleading. So sometimes having that unweighted GPA can be helpful, and they can access that they can just ask their counselor. We do not post it, but they can access it through their counselor. There are certain colleges that are reaches for every student, as I mentioned. You can see a list on the left, and then schools that we have sort of categorized as just about everyone's reach. You'll see a few underlined there, and the reason being, I mean, this is several years now that Northeastern and UMass Amherst, and the reason they're underlined is because we, as parents of high school kids, myself as well, it's not this, if you attended Northeastern, if you're a Northeastern alum, a UMass Amherst alum, it's not, the admissions are not the same as they used to be when we were going through this. So that's why we have those highlighted. They're much harder to get into. They're more competitive now. And then there are certain majors that are more competitive as well. So although a college may be realistic for a student to get into under a general major, if they're applying to a more specific competitive major, like the ones listed here, nursing, PT, business, computer science, engineering are all highlighted, those can be more competitive to get into. Okay, so senior year, we're asking our students to communicate their earliest deadlines, especially to their counselor. And so they really need to be thinking about whether or not they're applying regular decision or if they're going to apply early action or early decision to any of their colleges, because that will make a huge difference in their time frame, meeting with their counselor, having us send their materials. So regular decision does remain the most common method. Those deadlines tend to be January 1st and later, and students have until May 1st to decide whether or not they'll be attending the school. Early action is for the strongest students or competitive programs. Nursing is a good example where anyone applying to a direct admit nursing program should expect to apply early action to their schools. You can apply early action to several schools, and you get a decision typically in December or January for some of the larger schools. And you still have until that May 1st decision date to reply. So you do want to have strong grades through the end of junior year if you're applying early, because they will see now less of your senior year grades. So you're applying with grades from 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and we will send first quarter grades to those schools as soon as they're available in early November. So they're seeing less of senior year grades. Restrictive early action is just, it's rare, but it's something to keep in mind that some private schools have specific requirements around their early action. So you want to just make sure you're reading all the fine print and make sure you're following their instructions about applying early. The other one is early decision. So that is typically in October, November, December-ish deadline, and this is binding. So unlike early action, where you have until May 1st to decide if you want to attend that school, early decision is where a student, a parent, guardian, and the counselor all have to sign a contract. So it's when a student has a top choice school that they have fallen in love with, they know they can afford it, and they really want to go there, they should still be a strong candidate. If they are admitted through early decision, then the student is expected to attend, and they do need to retract any applications they have sent out in the meantime. And BHS is not allowed to send any transcripts to other colleges once they find out they've been admitted. Student, I mentioned the contract. Some colleges, not all colleges, have 2 rounds of ED. So ED1 might be a November 1st deadline, ED2 might be a December or even January deadline. So some students do get a little bit strategic, where maybe they have a top choice school and they'll go through the first round of ED with that school, and they find out they're denied in December, and they might commit to doing a second round of ED2 at a different college that may have been their second choice, and that might be a January 1st deadline, so the timing works out for all of that. Rolling admission is, again, not all colleges have all of these options, so it is part of the research that students need to do. Some colleges may have early action but not early decision, or some colleges may have only early decision and no early action. And then some colleges have what's called rolling admission, where there's no set deadline where they wait for all of the pool of applicants to apply and they're comparing all these applicants together. This is more of a first come, first served, if you will, where you apply as soon as everything is ready, and it's often a quick turnaround where students get a decision pretty quickly, within a few weeks, and once the freshman class is filled up for that college, then they close rolling admissions. So with the state university system, including the UMass's, students, we often refer to this as a long-term research project. Applying to college and doing all the research and really poring over the individual college websites to figure out what is required, not only to apply, but then for financial aid requirements as well. So it's really important to dive deeper into individual college websites, and the same goes for the state system, to really look more closely at their test requirements. As we know, there are lots of colleges that went test optional. They were test optional prior to the pandemic, more so went test optional after the pandemic, and many of them remained test optional after the pandemic. And then some of the really competitive colleges, we've seen a few of them go back to requiring test scores again. So with the state university and UMass admissions, these things are constantly changing year to year. We can't even keep up with it. So it really is important to make sure you're checking the requirements for each school. And then some schools are test optional for general admission, but keep in mind that they may have restrictions for specific majors. I tend to use nursing as an example, where maybe they're test optional if you wanted a general major, but if you're applying to the direct admit nursing program, they may require test scores. And the same might occur for a student who is applying to the honors program. They may be required to submit test scores. And they may be required to submit them for merit scholarship consideration as well. For any of the state colleges in Massachusetts, including UMass, no student is admitted with a GPA lower than 2.0. So students with lower than a 2.0 GPA, we would encourage them to consider a community college path where they can always transfer to one of the state schools. And I think that's the next slide that shows, yes. So within our state school system, we have what's called the mass transfer, and it's A to B, meaning associates to bachelors. And it's an agreement between all of our community colleges. There's 15, so even though we talk a lot about Middlesex because it's so close to us, students, there are different majors offered at every community college in Massachusetts. So students may choose to go to Bunker Hill or a different location. They will be hooked up with an advisor at their community college. They will want to communicate their desire to be part of this program, where they would do 2 years at a community college, earn their associate's degree, and then transfer to a Mass state school and do 2 more years and earn their bachelor's degree from that state school. So it streamlines that process. It makes it a lot simpler. Oh, it is free, yes. Community college is free, but there's an asterisk there. There are certain stipulations. You do have to be a resident in Massachusetts at least 1 year, and if for international students, I know you have to have been at a Massachusetts high school for at least 3 years. So again, you do need to read the fine print, but that is an extra bonus. Community college is now free. So as students are starting to submit applications to their colleges, they have many responsibilities. They can't do this without us. I mean, they can submit their applications without us, but in order to have their transcript and letters of rec sent to their colleges, they have to communicate with us and meet with us. So they need to do their research. It's just like a long-term research project, carving out time each week to work on applications, meet with their counselor, things like that. Know your application requirements and deadlines, which again goes back to really poring over those individual college websites and making sure you read all the fine print there. Know counseling requirements and deadlines. So we couldn't possibly have a whole crop of students coming to us on November 1st requesting transcripts, so we do have a process where they need to meet with us ahead of time. Make and keep regular appointments. As Mr. Adebato said, the vast majority of seniors do have a study hall built into their first semester, so they have time to meet with us and ask questions. Check your BHS and personal email every day. We can't emphasize that enough. So all students were urged to use a personal email for college purposes, since the school Gmail is only in-house. And if a college were to email a student saying, hey, we're still missing your SAT scores, or we're still missing this part of your application, and they're not checking their email, then it could mean the difference between getting pushed from early action to regular decision. So they really want to be sure to be checking their email daily. And then they have to use SCORE. As Mr. Adebato said, that's the platform that we use to send transcript and letters of rec regardless of what application is being used, so they have to use that website. SCORE, I know it looks like Squire. A lot of people say that, but I can assure you it is pronounced SCORE. The company told us. All BHS documents are sent through SCORE. It's also how students can view those graphs that we mentioned, the scattergrams, so they can figure out what schools are reach, realistic, and safety based on our BHS data. It's how they can sign up for those college visits where the reps are coming here to visit. That was mentioned previously. It's how they can track application deadlines, and scholarship applications will be available, especially for local and community scholarships, through SCORE as well. So when it comes to who is sending what, there's no perfect way to time everything. We tell the students that this stuff is happening simultaneously. What BHS will send is the transcript, the school profile, which is an overview of our school. I think there's another slide for that coming up. We will send letters of rec and any supplemental materials that cannot be sent electronically. We would also, something else as an example might be an ED contract that we could send through SCORE electronically. What the student will send is their online application. So all students are responsible for clicking that submit button on their applications. And they have right up until the college deadline to do that. They will also then be prompted to pay an application fee, so they'll need a credit card handy at the time. They'll submit their essay, which is typically part of the Common Application, where they're just copying it and pasting it right into their Common App. If students are sending official SAT or ACT scores or Duolingo scores, they are responsible for sending those scores to the college from the website for any one of those testing agencies. Students are responsible for financial aid forms, so FAFSA is the big one, the federal form. Some colleges require the CSS profile, some private colleges, and then some colleges, it's rare, but they may have additional documents that need to be submitted for financial aid. We're seeing a lot more colleges that require the SRAR, sometimes referred to as SSAR, which is just an abbreviation for a self-reported student academic record, in which case the student might need to request an unofficial transcript from our office, which Mr. Adebato mentioned previously. So it's really the students inputting all of their classes and grades that they've gotten throughout high school, which can be tedious. And then any other supplemental materials that may be sent electronically. A good example is an art portfolio if someone is applying to an art program. So students have until the application deadline for the college to submit everything on the right. But what they need to do is communicate with us their early deadlines, and they will need to meet with us in advance of their deadline to make sure that we are sending letters of rec, transcript to their school. And so there's no way to time this perfectly. It's happening simultaneously, but they just need to give us typically at least 10 school days to submit everything. Okay, reminders when preparing to apply. These are things that we can walk them through when we meet with them. They have to complete the FERPA waiver on the Common App and on SCORE. That's waiving their rights or not waiving their right to view letters of recommendation after they enroll at college. And students will request transcripts with their school counselor at least 10 school days before the deadline. We all have these different colored slips. We've communicated this to students. And that will ensure that we send their transcript and letters by their deadline while they're wrapping up their applications and submitting those by the deadline. So breaking down the components of the application, transcript is always the most important piece of the application. It's the student's permanent academic record. It consists of final grades for grades 9 through 11. Levels are on there as well. For grade 12, if a student were to apply today, there would be no grades on there. Quarter 1 has not closed, so it would just list their senior year courses and level designation. And then usually around early November, quarter 1 grades close and are added to the transcript, and those remain on there until the mid-year. So any transcripts that are submitted to colleges between November and first week of February have first quarter grades on them. So we're always encouraging students to make sure they're starting off their senior year strong and they're maintaining those grades throughout the end of the year. It will include the GPA that was calculated at the end of junior year. So that is the GPA that remains on the transcript until the mid-year. For seniors, it's the only time that we recalculate GPA halfway through the year. But again, that is not until the first week of February. So that will typically go to colleges where students have applied regular decision or they're requesting mid-year updates. Transcript request forms, so there's 2 different types. We have a general, well, I should start with the first one. For college applications, I mentioned that we all have a different colored form, and this is the one where students have to schedule a meeting with us and they turn in this colored form, and this is what ensures that we send the transcripts and the letters of rec, and that's the one they have to turn in 10 school days before their first deadline. And they list the colleges they want us to send it to. They make sure those colleges are in SCORE. They tell us which letters are being sent to which college. So we're meeting with them for their college applications. But then for any other purpose, maybe for an outside scholarship, or maybe for that self-reported academic record I mentioned earlier, they might need an unofficial copy of their transcripts. And that's where we have this general white form out by our secretaries, where a student can just drop in, fill out the form, put it in the bin, and request a transcript, and within 24 hours they can come back and pick it up for themselves, for their own purposes. Oh, this is just an overview of that school profile. We automatically send this with transcripts, so if you're just curious what a school profile is, it's a two-sided document that tells specific information about our high school. So as you can imagine, as college admissions reps are comparing students from all across not just the country, the world, they're dealing with a lot of different transcripts and different high schools that run things differently. So it explains things like how we calculate GPA, how many APs we offer, demographics, and things like that. The college essay is another important piece. So in junior year, towards the end of the year, in the student English classes, students did work on a personal narrative that could potentially be their college essay if they wanted it to be. And I know many students are using that as their college essay. Some have started from scratch and written something completely different, and that's okay too. The Common App prompts were shared in our small group meetings last spring. There are 6, they do 6 specific prompts, and then the 7th one is topic of your choice. So they leave it wide open. And then many colleges do require supplemental questions, which is an additional question or two. It might be, why is BU a good match for you? So just something to note, that there may be some additional short answer questions that students need to complete as well. We encourage them to be themselves, tell a story they want to tell, ask for advice from 1 or 2 trusted advisors. A lot of students use their English teacher from last year or this year. Sometimes they share it with parents as well, not always. And we certainly urge them to proofread several times. And that's it. Ms. Murphy?
Okay, hello everyone. To continue on with components of the application, we're going to talk about recommendations. So last year, our now seniors, juniors verbally asked their teachers for a letter of recommendation. Are you willing to write me a letter? That was the first step, and now we're going to be doing that in SCORE officially, so the teachers will get a notification through SCORE, and they upload their letters through SCORE, and we end up sending their letters of recommendation to the teachers. So that's all that your student has to do with that. But we want the students to check the college requirements. So in the Common App, it'll say maybe 0 letters required, 1 optional. So it depends on the school. So we look at that with our students as well. Non-BHS optional recommendations can be emailed to the counselor or submitted through Common App. I had a student have someone from BCAT actually send me a letter, and I uploaded it to SCORE, and I can send it through SCORE. Alternatively, they can request that through the Common App by putting in that person's email, and they can send it that way. So rest assured, even if the person is outside of BHS or not a teacher in the school, we'll be able to send that on their behalf. We also encourage students to send thank you notes, write a nice handwritten thank you note. It's good practice for when they get out in the real world as well. Additional forms available through the counselor are letter of recommendation request forms for teachers and counselors. So some teachers may say, I have this form that I'd like you to fill out, and I think many of us, if not all of us, have a counselor request form. So that's asking the students a little bit more about what they want us to convey to the admissions counselors on their behalf. And that helps us write their letter and what they want to communicate to the admissions office. Some counselors have a parent questionnaire as well. Activity list, we did this with our students last year as well, so we kicked this off. It's almost like a mini resume. We just wanted them to include everything that they've done over the past 4 years. And anything that they've done this year can be included as well. So there is a section on the Common App that asks for all the activities that they've done, and then how many years they've participated, and a brief description of that, any leadership roles within that activity. We had the activity fair, I think it was last week or the week before, and I have some seniors who just signed up for to be part of some clubs or activities, and they can absolutely include that in their Common App and on their activity list. And like I mentioned before, this isn't a substitute for the activity section on the applications, whether it's on the Common App or if it's a direct-to-institution application. We assign this as an assignment through Google Classroom, and the classroom copy may periodically be shared with administrators upon requests for book awards or maybe some other things that we may need it for. So admissions testing, so we all know SAT and ACT, I think, at this point. But a lot of schools are test optional now, which means that your student does not have to send their test scores to be included in their admissions package as part of the consideration for admissions. So fairtest.org is a robust, great resource for students to see whether or not their college takes the scores, but a fun fact is 70% of all 2023 applicants to UMass Amherst did not send test scores. So a lot of times we see kids go test optional, and a lot of colleges are sort of getting away from that as a consideration in the application. But of course, we want your student to check college websites for individual policies and updates. The best resource, of course, we have SCORE, but the best resource is to go directly to the college website and directly to the major that you're looking at, and making sure you're hitting all the points that you need for your application. When to send your scores, so you only want to send your scores when they're above average for that college. And our students, we do a good job with communicating this to them. And we have scattergrams in SCORE, which we've talked about before, so they can sort of see a visual of where they stand next to other students who have applied from Burlington before, where their scores are, and what score is the average for the student from Burlington applying to, say, UMass Amherst. We want students to wait to get their results before sending them, so you don't want to automatically say when you sign up for the SAT or the ACT, yes, I'd like my scores to go automatically. Scores usually return within, I'd say, maybe 3 weeks at this point, maybe a couple. And you want to take a look at those scores before you send those off. And then when in doubt, do not self-disclose scores on Common App. So there is a piece on the Common App, I don't know if you've sat with your student or not to look through the Common App, but it says testing. So it asks if you want to self-report your scores. Usually we tell students, you want to say no there. Obviously the scores aren't considered official unless they're sent directly from the College Board. I'll talk about that in a second too. So if required, testing should be completed by January of senior year. We've added some more test dates. We just had a test in August, in September. We have one in October as well. So the turnaround date for the results to come back is more rapid now. So they should be getting it back within a few weeks. But they should wrap that up by January of their senior year. You want to check out the SAT and ACT website, so the College Board, for updated test dates, locations, and cancellations. So how to send your scores? Your students have signed up through the College Board, so it's a similar process. It is the responsibility of the student, so nothing comes directly from Burlington High School. So the student has to go into their College Board portal. If your student takes an AP course, it's the same, the College Board portal. That's where they signed up for the SATs. So you want to send your scores 3 to 4 weeks before the application deadline to ensure that it's processed and part of the application when they look at it. So try not to do a last minute. Follow instructions to send scores via College Board or ACT student. They're too similar. They're very similar, but it's very straightforward. And then SAT, both of them you want to wait to see your scores, of course, to send them. And of course, it also there's a fee. So with SATs, there's the option to do score choice. So what that means is if your student took the May SAT and they did better in the math section than they did in the June SAT, they can send the May math and then the June English. So, but ACT, however, it only reports the scores from the test state that you designate. So it's you just send your April scores, or you just send your, July scores. Communicating with admissions, of course, students should do the communicating, right? So they're going to be going to college, they're going to be on their own, so they should start advocating for themselves, which they're doing now, but we encourage students to be the ones to be filling out their applications, of course, and to be communicating with the colleges directly. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. We sort of help our students with that too if they need to make contact with them. Email should be well worded with proper greetings and signature. We're practicing that with them as well, again, to get them ready for the real world and the professional world. And then we encourage students to see their counselor if they're prepping for an interview. I just worked with one of my students on prepping for an interview for Fairfield, and we can do a mock interview. We can talk about some questions they may want to ask the interviewer. So we're happy to help with that as well. So after students apply, Q1 grades. So this is super important. So I tell all my seniors too, I think we've all probably heard of the senior slide, but we encourage our students to continue to work hard, all through their senior year. Q1 grades and mid-year transcripts are sent automatically through SCORE. So we send those to all the schools that the students are applying to. The final transcript is only sent to the school that the student is attending. And we do that automatically as well. Students are going to track the status of their application. So after they've applied, they're not going to check if the school has their materials through Common App or SCORE. What's going to happen is they're going to get an email from, say your student applies to Merrimack. They're going to get an email from Merrimack that says, thank you for applying, here's your username and password, and that's where they're going to monitor all their materials. So they'll see a green check next to initial transcript, and then maybe a red X right after for first quarter grades, but students know we get those grades around Thanksgiving time, and they're sent there, and that's where the students are going to check the portal for everything they have. It's going to say SAT scores, letters of recommendation, check, 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 and that's sort of, they're going to monitor all of those. I know they have several portals to monitor, but that's how they communicate to us too, like, hey, so-and-so, this letter didn't go through, or most of the time it's just us, our portal, hooking up with their portal and getting everything all together. And then scholarship applications, I think Mr. Adebato is going to touch upon scholarships a little bit later. We're going to start those in February, I think the local scholarships, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then if deferred or waitlisted, students can talk to us about next steps. We can help them with that. A lot of schools will say, do you still want to be on our list? Are you still interested? May 1st, the decisions and the deposits are due. That's sort of when you make that commitment. You can only do it for one college, and we can't send a final transcript to more than one college. So it's that one college that you indicate that you are going to be enrolling. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, we want everyone to have a fun senior year, finish out high school, but offers of admission are conditional, so you want to make sure that you keep up your schoolwork, make sure that you still keep up your academics, so that's a key piece as well. So other considerations, so the NCAA, you'll know if your student is going to be playing a D1 or D2 sport. They probably already spoke with their counselor if that's the case. There are necessary courses on the NCAA website. Students must earn at least a 2.3 GPA in core courses. You're going to request your junior year transcript via the website. So this is something that your student can work on with their individual counselor. NCAA permanently removed the SAT, ACT qualifying score requirement for first year D1 and 2 athletes, but it may still be required for admission to the college. Students with disabilities, so if your student is on a 504 or has an IEP, colleges grant accommodations on a case-by-case basis. Most schools have a service for students with disabilities center. So your student should check or meet with individual colleges. Usually they have a full-on, part of their website for just that. And there are different guidelines and deadlines, and we can help them with that process as well. Students applying to Mass State universities who submit documentation of a disability are eligible for exemption from the SAT or the ACT as a part of the package for the requirement. Students should discuss admissions testing and college requirements with their counselor. Certainly, we talk about, you know, if a college wants your most recent testing done, you know, we can certainly work with you to get that to them. But that's something that we can help them with as well. And then the gap year, a lot of us have heard of this too. This is time intentionally taken away after high school and right before college. One thing I will say is that even if your student is considering taking a gap year, we do recommend that they still apply to college during this time. But if they are accepted, they can defer admission for a year to pursue that gap year experience. Usually a gap year is you know, a semester, or if they're volunteering in the U.S. or abroad, like a Peace Corps type experience, immersion, work exchange, outward bound, things like that. And we have on our website, we have a list, links to some of the programs. So financial aid, I think Mr. Adebato may talk a little bit more about this, but Financial Aid 101, that's in the auditorium October 23rd from 6:30 to 7:30, and if you can't make it, BCAT is going to record it. And MIFA is a great resource, so they'll help you, they'll walk through everything with you about like loans and what merit aid is, so they're a great resource. They also have webinars, a lot of webinars on their website, so they're a superior resource. They're excellent. And then the FAFSA Festival is October 22nd from 4 to 6, and you get one-on-one virtual support on filling out the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is a big deal. Okay, so October 1st, I think we got confirmation, I know it's been later in some years, is when the FAFSA opens. So that's a free application for federal student aid. So it's okay to create the ID now. So it's need-based and merit-based aid, and it's required by all colleges for financial aid. And it used to be the, I think it was estimated family contribution, and now it's index, I think, right? Student aid index. Yeah, so they changed that up. So that's just sort of like what you're able to contribute, and they'll, generate that number for you. Other opportunities for completing the FAFSA, the Pell Grant and the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, you have to display financial need. The Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Adams Scholarship that comes through MCAS, and college and university grants and scholarships. So those are provided directly by colleges and universities. So that's sort of the merit money. Like if your student gets into, again, I guess I'm using Merrimack for example tonight, they can say, we're going to give you, say, 20 grand a year if you maintain a 3.0 over the course of 4 years. The CSS and the financial aid profile, that's used for non-federal financial aid programs. It's some private colleges, so that's what you'll see there. It's often due in the fall of your senior year, and it opens October 1st. It's $25 for the first school, and then $16 for each additional school. Again, you want to be aware of each college's specific financial requirements, deadlines, and additional applications. So this is something we can work with our students as well. Now, Mr. Adebato.
And on the 23rd of October, that night, this obviously isn't a financial aid night, but on the 23rd, we have Amy Staffier, who worked actually at Harvard for several years. Now she's at Simmons. She's the Assistant Director of Financial Aid. She's very knowledgeable. So that will be recorded by BCAT, but again, if you're able to make that, you can, she walks you through the process from beginning to end, so it's very helpful. So I was just going to talk, I'm going to take us through to the end here, but I wanted to talk about local scholarships. So we'll be posting this on SCORE. What we essentially post on SCORE is a Google Drive that connects you to a list of scholarships. And so there are different levels of scholarships. We have national scholarships, state, and local. And we find over the years, we do have students every now and then when we'll get like a national or a state level scholarship. They tend to be very competitive. And we do list those. But the local scholarships is where most of the Burlington High School seniors will have the opportunity to receive scholarships. And it's not one. So our scholarship awards night this past year was over $350,000 to Burlington seniors. All right, so it's quite an event, and this isn't one person or one committee deciding on all these awards. All right, it's a multitude of organizations, agencies, families that are donating scholarships, and each scholarship has its own parameters and process. And that will all be spelled out. And really, for the local awards, February is when we'll really start to post all those applications, late February, March. So how many parents have heard of Adopt a Class? All right, so Adopt a Class is a in-town program in Burlington, and that essentially is a volunteer-driven program. Parents usually contribute time to different events from kindergarten through 8th grade. And then when students get to high school, they now take the ownership of doing these volunteer events, and all those hours are collected. For those parents that volunteered, you signed something indicating you were there in a time frame. Teresa, the registrar in our office, has a gigantic binder, and everything is tracked and collected. And so Adopt a Class students, it's a very simple application, one page, no essay, but you write down all the events that you did and the number of hours, and then Teresa verifies it, and then you just have to apply, and then if you've hit the minimum threshold, you'll get a scholarship. All right, but you'd be surprised how many students don't go through that process. So that particular program usually distributes about $25,000. All right, and you can see there's a lot more organizations and donors contributing. We have memorial scholarships, a lot of businesses in town contribute. So please keep your eyes on that. Some of the scholarships are specific for certain majors, but a lot of them are very generic too. And they're not all, again, there are some more competitive academic scholarships, but there's plenty of scholarships for, the average student. So please keep that in mind as you navigate through this process. We also work with a vendor called Scholarship America. They allow us to house a lot of applications there as well. And like I said, in February, applications will be available. We do a parent breakfast in the scholarship program, usually in late February, March, right around the same time all the applications open. So keep your eyes out for that. MCAS, you heard Mrs. Murphy talk a little bit about that. We all know it does not count for graduation anymore. However, it still does, students still have the opportunity, depending on the score, to get a tuition waiver. And so it would just be to the mass public colleges and universities, so it wouldn't be for private schools. And the way these two MCAS scholarships work, it's all based on, and I say scholarship, it's a tuition waiver. So UMass Amherst, for example, UMass Amherst tuition is, we'll say, about $2,000 a year, give or take. It's about $2,000 a year for tuition, and then room, board, and fees is usually about, say, $28,000 to $30,000 per year. It waives you from that $2,000 piece. So it's obviously not as much as you would like, but it's still $2,000 over 4 years is an $8,000 savings. So it could potentially be beneficial. So that's what these two awards are. They're both tuition waivers. You use one or the other. But the way it works, John and Abigail Adams, it's a very simple one. It's students that score in the top 25% of MCAS scores within the school, not across the state, within the school. So the top 25% that take the math, English, and science, state does a calculation. Students get an automatic letter. If you get it, you take that letter to the financial aid office and they waive the tuition. That's the John and Abigail Adams. The other one is the Stanley Koplik. Stanley Koplik is, it adds some steps to the process. So you may not have scored in the top 25%. That is usually students that would be filling out the Koplik. So the Koplik asks, in addition to getting at least the categorization of the scores have changed a little, but if you get proficient on one of the three test scores, or meeting expectation on one of the three and exceeding on the other two, so they take math, English, and science, so you got to be minimum meeting one of the three, and the other two should be exceeding, if that makes sense. And so, which it may not, but it is kind of spelled out on the website. So if a student meets the threshold for that, you need to do 2 extra things. And it could be a score of a 3 or higher on 2 AP exams. It could be 2 dual enrollment courses. It could be a dual enrollment course and an AP exam. There's different things you can do in order to meet the COPLIC. The COPLIC adds extra steps because it's not as high of a threshold. And so these awards would be communicated to you. Students that will receive an Adams, we will probably be getting that within the next couple of weeks. And that's a letter we would mail home. COPLIC, you could probably look at your scores now to see if you hit the COPLIC. And we will send an email out to students as well that have hit the COPLIC award. But my approach or advice would be wait to see if you have an Adams first. And you could certainly reach out to your counselor or myself to ask. It's not for a couple of weeks. But if the Adams is easier, like I said, you just get a letter from DESE, from the state. And if you don't get an Adams, then you can take a closer look at the COPLIC. Use caution. So, I know there's services out there that tell you they can find scholarships for you. I would just, do your research. I would make sure that it's, it's a trusted situation. And I hate to see, and because we've heard over the years where parents or students have paid money for certain things that you could potentially do for free. For example, the FAFSA is free. We had a student one year that signed up, thought it was the FAFSA website, because it's FAFSA.org. I think she went to FAFSA.com and went through the process and paid $80. And what she ended up doing is paying this FAFSA.com to put all their information into the FAFSA. So she didn't realize that she was doing that. We did get half her money back, but just be aware of these types of things because they're, obviously they know scholarship money is important, certainly the tuition prices. So parents are in a vulnerable stage. So I would just do your research on that stuff and use caution. Selective service, this is actually an automatic that we make sure we inform that students need to register with selective service so you can qualify for financial aid. So please be aware of that. And then I see mostly parents here, couples, I think 1 or 2 students, but again, there's obviously different approaches to this, but just know seniors are hearing it a lot. Where are you going to college? What's your college list? They're hearing it from all angles. And I know sometimes that parents at home, you see the side of your child, others may not sometimes, and so it can get a little stressful. So I would, make sure you kind of look through this list, but I do think the conversational piece is important. Maybe have a time once or twice a week, where you talk to your child about this process instead of every day. Maybe you find a time where you two can communicate it, or 3, or as a family. Discuss restrictions up front. I want to go to California. We can't afford California. You can't take flights there. That type of thing. Any kind of restrictions, you want to make sure that's up front. Sticker prices, you hear college tuition prices, $80,000 a year, $90,000 a year. A lot of times it doesn't end up being that amount. Once you go through the financial aid process, scholarship process, it may be a little bit lower. But again, when you're organizing that list, you do want to make sure you're choosing colleges with a variety of cost structures, but we just don't want that initial sticker price to scare you at first. I would still dig a little bit deeper into the college if you're really interested. Deadlines, as you heard all night long, deadlines are an important piece. That's where parents can certainly be helpful. Let students, they're starting to make this decision process for themselves, so I would just kind of encourage that. And the only other thing I'll mention on that list is please let your son or daughter reach out to the colleges. Do not do that for them. You could certainly be there to help guide them, that type of thing. But I think it's important, and even in school now, we encourage students, if you have a if you want information from a teacher, for example, if you can't get there in person, you can send them an email. So sending emails, I think, or just making sure in any communication that it's driven from the student is an important piece. Again, you've heard about this all night, but we just, you know, being organized with this process is important, and kind of staying ahead on it. So being here tonight, I think, is a great step. But just be organized with the process as students kind of navigate through this. And that communication piece is very important. And, you know, if the stress level you think is not healthy or you're concerned, you could certainly give us a call. We'd be more than willing to support and help through that process. All right, and then just a couple last things before we open it up to questions. You've heard us talk about SCORE. And actually, students sign up for the college reps that come to the high school. Students sign up for those visits through SCORE. So I don't know if parents that have accounts have seen it. But if you want an account, we would ask parents, you can have your own account with the same information, but we have registration forms in the back. If you want a SCORE account, fill that out, and you'll get an email with username and access information. And you know, I would encourage you to do that. As parents, you can actually make recommendations to your son or daughter for colleges. All right, so if you wanted them to check out a particular school, you can actually click a couple buttons, and students have a recommended spot, and you can certainly do that as well. So if you're interested in that, if you could fill that out, that'd be great. Senior parent questionnaire, which was optional. If some of the counselors would be reaching out to you potentially, but if you wanted a parent questionnaire, you would want to email your son or daughter's counselor. If you recall from when we talked about recommendations, we had said sometimes parents can fill out a parent questionnaire, and that can help the counselor with the recommendation process. That is not something that's back there because it's more individualized for each counselor. So you'd want to email your son or daughter's counselor. And then the last thing is the evaluation form, which is in the back. If you could fill it out, let us know how we can improve. Any thoughts or ideas, we would appreciate it. We like constructive criticism, so feel free to give us that information as well. So I appreciate everyone making it through this tonight. I think we set a record. We got through everything, you know, just over an hour, which is great. But at this point, I'll open it up to any questions that any parents have, and I'll stick around after if you wanted to ask a question that you didn't want to ask in the crowd here. Any questions? All right.